After a vacation that was supposed to offer a reprieve from their stressful lives, the Bennett family found themselves facing a new, harsh reality. What had been a much-anticipated getaway turned into a nightmare of discrimination and injustice. The peaceful family retreat, planned by David, a seasoned detective, and his wife, Rachel, a respected civil rights lawyer, was meant to allow them to reconnect with their children, Ava and Noah. Both David and Rachel had demanding careers, with little time to spare for one another, and this vacation was their chance to finally unwind and enjoy their time together. The family's destination was a luxurious beach resort by the sea, with warm golden sands and clear blue waters. David had hoped to relax by the pool, without the pressure of urgent work calls or the constant tension of his job. As a detective, he had seen the worst of human nature, often working on cases that left emotional scars. Rachel, too, had spent countless hours in the courtroom, fighting for justice in the face of systemic inequality. This holiday was supposed to be their reward, a rare moment of peace and a chance to focus on their children without the weight of their responsibilities pulling at them. However, their relaxation was short-lived. As the family settled into their vacation, they were confronted by a suspicious security guard who questioned their status as guests. His aggressive demeanor made David and Rachel uneasy, as they were no strangers to discrimination, but it was the first time they had encountered it during what was supposed to be a peaceful break. The guard's behavior set off an unspoken tension, leaving David and Rachel feeling that this holiday was no longer about rest. It had become a reminder of the prejudice that continues to plague their everyday lives. Despite the unsettling encounter, the Bennetts decided not to remain silent. Their resolve to fight back and demand justice grew stronger. They knew that their struggle was not just for their family, but for others facing the same injustices. The vacation may have ended in disappointment, but it marked the beginning of their fight to make a difference. The Bennett family's return from their vacation was filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. What was meant to be a brief escape from their hectic lives had instead become a painful reminder of the discrimination they had long fought against. Still, they were united in their resolve to ensure that the injustice they had faced would not go unchallenged. David and Rachel knew that their fight was not just for their own dignity, but also to inspire change for others who had faced similar hardships. As soon as they arrived home, Rachel dove straight into action. She set up her study, clearing her desk and organizing the evidence they had collected during their time at the resort. The videos recorded by fellow guests at the pool, showing the wrongful treatment of her family, became the backbone of their legal case. Rachel meticulously reviewed each clip, analyzing every detail. She knew that each piece of evidence was crucial. This wasn't just a fight for justice for the Bennetts. It was a fight for the countless others who had been discriminated against in silence. With the weight of that responsibility on her shoulders, Rachel made it her mission to turn this moment of pain into a powerful weapon for change. Meanwhile, David struggled with the emotional aftermath of the incident. As an experienced detective, he had always believed that he understood the justice system intimately. But now, having been victimized by the very system he once worked to protect, he found himself questioning everything he had once taken for granted. He had seen and dealt with injustice in his career, but never like this, never when it was happening to him and his family. Despite the emotional toll, David's commitment to the fight never wavered. He reached out to colleagues and human rights organizations, asking for their support in amplifying their story. With each phone call and message of encouragement, the Bennetts grew more resolute. They weren't just fighting a personal battle, they were fighting for justice for every individual who had ever been judged unfairly based on their race or appearance. Together, they were determined to ensure their story would spark a broader movement for social change. As the weeks passed, the Bennett family's understanding of the situation deepened, particularly for their eldest child, Ava. At 12, Ava was beginning to grasp the true significance of the events they had experienced. She had noticed the change in her parents, the way their moods shifted from hopeful anticipation to deep frustration and determination. Ava asked questions that her parents struggled to answer, her innocent curiosity piercing through the walls of their own emotions. "Dad, why are they treating us this way?" Ava asked one evening, her eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "Why does everyone think we don't belong here?" David's heart ached as he looked at his daughter, who was now being forced to confront the ugly reality of prejudice and injustice. It was a conversation no parent ever wants to have with their child. He had promised himself he would protect her from the pain of such experiences, but now he had to face the fact that Ava was old enough to see the truth. Rachel, ever the calming presence, wrapped her arms around Ava and reassured her. "Sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand, sweetheart," she said softly. "They judge us based on how we look, and that's not fair. But we have to stand up for what's right, for ourselves and for others." David watched as Rachel spoke to their daughter with compassion and strength. It was in these quiet moments of reassurance that David found the courage to keep going. This fight was no longer just about winning a legal case, it was about teaching his children the importance of standing up for justice and equality, even when the world feels unfair. David realized that the battle they were fighting was not just for them, but for the next generation. They were setting an example of resilience and integrity for Ava and Noah. The family's bond grew stronger in the face of adversity. The more they talked and shared their emotions, the more they were united in their mission. With every passing day, they became more determined, knowing that their struggle was far from over but would ultimately make a difference. The Bennett family's battle intensified as they entered the next phase of their fight for justice. The resort and police department, faced with mounting pressure from public opinion and the growing media attention, quickly launched a defense to protect their image. Their legal teams began sending formal letters, claiming that the security measures taken against the Bennetts were simply routine. They insisted that the family's treatment was due to safety protocols and had nothing to do with race. These statements, however, only fueled Rachel's resolve. She knew the truth, and she wasn't about to let their narrative go unchallenged. Rachel spent countless hours poring over every piece of evidence, carefully constructing counterarguments to dismantle the resort's defense. Her sharp legal mind went to work, preparing the strongest case she could, one that would leave no room for doubt. She knew that public opinion could play a pivotal role, so she also reached out to journalists and human rights activists to ensure their story was widely shared. She wanted the world to see what had happened to her family, no longer just a personal attack, but a glaring example of the systemic discrimination that still plagued society. David, while usually calm in high-pressure situations, found himself struggling with the emotional toll of this fight. As an experienced detective, he had faced danger and violence on the job, but nothing had prepared him for the pain of seeing his family treated unfairly. Reviewing the videos from the resort, seeing his children's confused and fearful expressions, and watching his wife, Rachel, fight for their dignity, made his blood boil. This wasn't just about legal proceedings, it was about defending his family's honor and dignity. With each passing day, the pressure mounted. The resort's legal team continued to push their defensive arguments, while the media's portrayal of the incident began to shift. Articles began suggesting that the Bennetts were making too much of the situation, that they had been too sensitive. This hurt Rachel deeply, but it also fueled her fight. She knew they had to hold their ground, not just for their family, but for all those who had suffered silently. She wasn't backing down, this was a fight for justice, and she would see it through to the end. The Bennett family's fight for justice had reached a critical juncture. As the case gained more attention, so did the scrutiny they faced. The media buzz grew louder, with some articles supporting their cause and others attacking their motives. The resort's defensive strategies continued to be in full swing, and the Bennett family found themselves constantly defending not only their rights but also their character. The accusations that they were overreacting or using the situation to draw attention only fueled Rachel's resolve to press on. With the legal battle becoming more intense, Rachel doubled down on her efforts. She pored over legal briefs, cross-referenced witness statements, and examined every piece of evidence she had gathered. This case had become much more than a personal grievance. It had become a symbol of the fight against injustice and racial discrimination. Rachel knew that if they won, it wouldn't just be a victory for her family, it would be a step forward for all those who had suffered in silence. But the challenge was far from easy. David, who had spent years investigating crimes, was now thrust into the role of a victim, and he found the emotional weight of the situation difficult to bear. As a father, seeing his children endure such confusion and fear was heartbreaking. Ava, especially, was struggling to understand why people would treat them differently. "Why do they keep treating us like this, Dad?" she asked one night. David didn't have a simple answer, but he promised Ava that they would fight to ensure she would never face such hatred again. Their resolve only strengthened as they realized that this fight was not just about legal justice, it was about sending a powerful message. The fight for equality and dignity would not be silenced, and with every setback, they grew more determined to ensure that the truth was heard. They knew that this would be a long and challenging road, but they were committed to seeing it through for the sake of their family, their children, and the future. With the support of the community behind them, the Bennetts were ready to continue their battle, no matter the cost. The courtroom was packed, a mix of supporters, reporters, and curious onlookers who had been following the Bennett family's story. The tension in the air was palpable as the defense team for the resort and the police department prepared their arguments. The Bennetts, however, stood resolute, determined to present their truth. Rachel's nerves were steady. She had spent countless hours preparing for this moment. This was their chance to expose the discrimination that had been hidden behind the guise of security measures. As the trial began, the defense team presented their case. They insisted that the security personnel were merely following protocol to ensure the safety of all guests. They emphasized that their actions had been standard procedure, claiming that the questioning of the Bennett family had been routine and nothing more. The resort's legal team called several witnesses who testified that the Bennetts had overreacted, portraying the family's response as unwarranted. The defense sought to discredit the very foundation of the Bennetts' claims, attempting to paint them as unreasonable troublemakers. Rachel listened carefully, noting each weak point in the defense's argument. She knew the evidence they had collected, the videos from witnesses, the testimonies, the emotional toll on her family, would dismantle their claims. When it was finally her turn to speak, she rose with calm confidence, ready to turn the tide in their favor. Rachel began her closing arguments, addressing the court with clarity and conviction. She spoke not only of the pain her family had endured but also of the broader implications of what they had faced. She reminded the courtroom that no one should be judged based on their appearance or background. The Bennett family had been subjected to an injustice that many others had suffered in silence, but now their voices were being heard. "This is not just about us," Rachel said firmly. "This is about making sure that no one else has to go through what we did. It's about standing up for what is right, for justice, and for fairness." Her words resonated in the courtroom, forcing the defense to confront the undeniable truth. As the trial continued, it was clear that the Bennett's fight had become something much larger than a lawsuit. It was a battle for justice that would echo far beyond the courtroom walls. The moment had finally arrived, the culmination of months of tireless effort, emotional struggle, and unwavering determination. As the court recessed and the judge prepared to announce the verdict, the Bennett family stood together, hand in hand, surrounded by their supporters. The tension in the room was almost unbearable, but David and Rachel remained focused. They knew the importance of what they had done. This case wasn't just about them, it was about every person who had ever been discriminated against or treated unfairly because of their race or appearance. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom, declaring the Bennett family victorious. The ruling was a major step forward in the fight for justice. The resort was held accountable for the wrongful treatment they had subjected the Bennetts to, and the court recognized the deep emotional toll the family had endured. The Bennett family had not only won their case, they had sent a clear message that injustice would no longer go unchallenged. The courtroom erupted in applause, and David held Rachel close, both of them overwhelmed with a sense of relief and pride. Ava and Noah, who had been witness to their parents' struggle, smiled up at them with pride. Ava, who had asked so many difficult questions throughout this journey, now understood that her parents had fought not just for their dignity but for the future of others who would come after them. They had sparked a movement that would inspire countless others to stand up against discrimination and injustice. But the victory didn't end there. In the wake of the ruling, the Bennett family's case became a catalyst for change. The resort pledged to implement new policies to ensure all guests were treated equally, and other businesses began to follow suit. Legislators took notice, introducing new bills aimed at strengthening civil rights protections in public accommodations. The Bennetts had not just reclaimed their dignity, they had helped shift the conversation around racial discrimination, making it clear that such behavior would no longer be tolerated. David and Rachel knew that their work was far from over. The fight for justice, for equality, would continue, but now they had hope that change was possible, and that their children would grow up in a world where fairness and dignity were the standard, not the exception. Their victory was a powerful reminder that, when people come together and fight for what is right, justice can, and will, prevail.